What's up? I'm Casey and this is CaseyReacts. Everybody has opinions about something, but not everybody's willing to change them. If you have an opinion, but you're willing to change it depending on whether or not the right kind of information is presented to you, well, then ChangeMyView might be the right sub for you. I'll be reading off the poster's question, one of the top comments, and maybe giving my own insight on it. Alright, let's get right into it. Philosophy education should be mandatory curriculum in high school. Let's start by clarifying the minimum condition that I'm arguing for. I believe there should be, at the very least, a one-year class at the senior level, no less than junior level, but senior would be ideal, that covers 101 and intro-level text and ideas. Why philosophy is important to everyone, not just philosophers. Virtually every aspect of our lives, no matter who or where you are, is intimately altered by the various structures of power and decision-making surrounding us, whether that be governments and laws, corporate policies, or the decisions ordinary individuals make on a daily basis. All of these decisions and behaviors are immediately underpinned by ethics or morality and the often intense disagreements in how we evaluate them. You can hardly name a political issue that doesn't invoke strong, if not intense, fundamental moral disagreements. The world has been in a state of strife regarding capitalist institutions for as long as they've existed. There remains a massive division in attitudes towards interpersonal relationships regarding things like sexuality and race, which at their most extreme have led to regular acts of violence and terrorism. The connective tissue between all of this is that we have these wildly inconsistent and disoriented worldviews that constantly clash because of their incompatibility. But philosophy promises us the possibility of a solution. Philosophy suggests that there is an identifiable truth that could correct and align these entanglements, that we could work through a system of logical and critical thinking to find resolution and peace through a coherent and discoverable truth to these polarizing questions. In short, I argue that every one of us basically understands that ethics and morality are indispensable foundations to human living and that the skill set of being able to critically evaluate these things is likewise important. It follows then that we should be extremely interested in making sure all citizens have a basic working understanding of philosophy so that they have the tools to navigate the moral decisions they make throughout their lives at the individual level, the international and political level, and everywhere in between. Finally, I want to briefly summarize the structure of philosophy and make it clear why it's needed in its entirety and not just the ethics component. If we start by defining philosophy as the discipline of trying to identify and make coherent the most fundamental truths of life and the universe, what should become evident is the certain structure or flow of logic from the starting point to the finish. The most fundamental set of questions that must be answered are those of what makes things true? And what is knowledge? How do we come to know something rather than merely believe it? This is the branch of epistemology. It follows that we cannot exactly determine ethical truths if we haven't even defined what the truth is in the first place. Next, we deal with questions of metaphysics, all that stem from the question, what is real? It does us little good to attempt to reconcile moral disagreements if we don't agree about the nature of reality. Do we have free will? Does a God exist who makes demands of us? Do rights actually exist in some sense, or did we just make them up? All of these are metaphysical questions that need to be answered before we can find answers about morality. After our predicates of knowledge and reality are established, we can start asking questions of what is right and wrong, or ethics, and using this to come to agreements over how to approach government, laws, and international relations. This is philosophy in a nutshell, and we need all of it, not just ethics, to make coherent and consistent decisions. To conclude, I believe fully that high school juniors or seniors would be fully capable of and immeasurably benefited by a philosophical education. It would create the conditions we need for our society to escape this environment of perpetual strife, confusion, polarization, and manipulation that is the beating heart of most, even all, of our current problems as a species. That whole thing was a mouthful. Oh my goodness. I took a philosophy course in high school as an elective. It was great. I love philosophy. The question, as always, with a thread about X should be mandatory curriculum, is what are you going to cut? Well, I can say it right now. Cut gym. There is no need for the kids to do gym, or teenagers, whomever. There's no need for it to be a mandatory class. Don't get rid of it entirely, but make it an elective. Back whenever I was in high school doing mandatory gym, all we had to do was show up, dress in shorts, and that was it. That was our grade. Am I there? Am I in shorts? If so, I get my A for the day. I had to do that every single day, 5 days a week. We just have to go into the gym for a period, sit down, do homework, do whatever. We could run, play basketball if we wanted to, but most of the time, people just sat down and played on their phones. It doesn't make any sense that they would make that a mandatory class if they're not actually going to mandate people doing stuff during it. Also, some people have no desire to do that. Nobody wants to go to gym unless they're one of the random kids that really love to get exercise. That's not me saying that the average kid hates exercise. That's me saying that the average kid doesn't think, ooh, wow, school, perfect time for exercise. No. If the average kid's going to exercise, they can do it on their own time, or they can do it with an elective for like school sports. But forcing kids to do it, it's really just a silly concept. So I think if you're going to cut anything, cut the mandatory PE, and that'll make a perfect spot for that mandatory philosophy. You are allowed to explosively lose your temper if you're provoked far enough with no means of escape. Everyone should learn to control their temper, be more understanding, de-escalate a situation, and find a non-angry solution, and if all else fails, be allowed to remove themselves from the scene. But if a person's trapped in a scenario where they're not allowed to escape, such as like being cornered and restrained by a person who keeps screaming in their face, they are allowed to explosively lose their temper to show you have crossed the line. My definition of explosively losing temper: vulgarities, yelling, throwing things, etc. to force the other party to back off. I'm strongly against getting physical unless they have to fend off the person that is provoking them. The anger is useful to communicate willingness to defect from cooperation. It's a game theory tactic to disincentivize walking all over you. But if you understand this, does losing control win you any advantage? Can you accomplish the same through strategic outburst rather than letting your emotions control you? As someone who does have minor issues with anger management, I completely agree there is a time and place to lose your temper. However, I also agree that there are a lot of times and places where you should not lose your temper, where it's a lot better just to hold on to it. Example: you've had a rough day. Your boss is screaming at you at work. You go home. You decide you're going to stop off at McDonald's. They screw up something on your order. Is it right to lose your temper and scream at them for putting pickles on your burger when you ask for no pickles? Absolutely not. Not the time, not the place. It's not their problem that you're having a bad day, so why in the world would you try and make it their problem? Now on the flip side, what happens if you had a bad day, you come home, you get to your house, nobody's there, but you get in, and you find out that someone's inside your house trying to rob you? Should you lose your temper? Absolutely. Go ballistic. Go berserk. Go make sure that they don't ever think of doing that again. If you have the ability to defend your home and scare the hell out of them at the same time by losing your temper, do it. That is one of the most appropriate times that you can do it. Losing your temper should never be the first thing that you go for, but it should always be an option depending on the situation. If you need to let it out, it can be very, very helpful to let it out. Just make sure it's at the right time. There's no good or bad music genres, just good or bad artists. I get it. Rock is your favorite music genre. You hate country or pop. Whatever it is, it doesn't make your favorite genre the one. Music is like food. There's pizza, hamburgers, sandwiches, tacos, burritos, nuggets, etc. That doesn't make one better than the other. But there are people or restaurants that can make great and delicious pizza, and others who make average pizzas. The same way, there are amazing rappers with great lyrics. I'll just say lyrics. There are amazing rappers with great lyrics and rhythm, and others you use an overproduced beat and have poor lyrics. There are metal guitarists with great technique and years of experience, and others who don't. And this whole my favorite genre is better than yours thing applies to almost everything. Books, video games, movies. I think it's the subgenres that can be bad or good, subjectively of course. Like, I think stadium country is god-awful, pandering bullcrap. But not all country is like that, and as a genre, it has quite a bit of good work. Yeah, this is absolutely true. Don't get down on somebody just because you don't like their kind of music. If someone likes Mongolian throat singing, that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing just because you don't like it. It just means that you don't like that particular genre of music. Now, I'll go one step further and say that there aren't really even bad artists necessarily. Like, people hate Cardi B with a passion. People love Cardi B with a passion. People hate and love Nicki Minaj. People hate and love insert artist here. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are a bad artist. It just means that that individual person does not like that individual artist. There's nothing wrong with that. You're able to have your own opinions. Just don't try to force them down everybody else's throats and say, hey, that music is terrible and you're terrible for listening to it, because they like that music. There's nothing wrong with that. Blaming a gun owner for having their gun stolen out of their home or car is victim blaming. Let's say John is a single guy, leaves a couple of his firearms outside of his safe in his home. No one lives with him, nor is supposed to have access to his home. If someone breaks into his home and takes one or some of his firearms, and you blame John for that, or the crime committed afterwards with those firearms, you're victim shaming. If Lucy keeps her pistol underneath the seat of her car, and while she runs into the grocery store, someone breaks in and takes her gun, she's not to blame. She is not to blame for the armed robbery that may happen afterwards with her own firearm. John and Lucy were both victims of a crime. You wouldn't blame other victims of crime if they failed to do as much as possible to stop it, right? Your car got stolen? Should have gotten some stronger glass, a kill switch, or not been in a bad area. You got raped? Shouldn't have been drinking. You should work out and be stronger, or you shouldn't wear that. Your house burned down? Why didn't you install a sprinkler system? Now, if you have a restricted person, child, or mentally defective person who's allowed access to your dwelling, yeah, more things need to be done. That still does not mean that that person cannot be the victim of a crime. If those individuals are aware that they are taking property that is not theirs, why should you blame a victim? Why does it seem okay in this case to victim blame but not in other cases? You are victim shaming. No one is blaming John for being stolen from. That can happen. John is being blamed for not properly securing his firearms. This would be the case regardless of whether the firearms were stolen or not. If you tell a police officer you left your firearms outside at home, you'll likely get at least a stern warning not to do that. I also believe your comparisons are unfair, as the people were just adhering to the standard. A gun owner with a safe leaving their weapons outside of it is not acting in a standard and acceptable fashion. So very true, don't victim shame, don't try to make them feel bad for it. However, common sense does have to come into play somewhere. You can't just live in a high crime area and expect to leave your gun out with no problem. If you get your house broken into, you leave your gun out, you do whatever it is that makes it get stolen. Yeah, it's not necessarily your fault, but there are some common sense things that you could have used to prevent that. You're not at fault whatsoever, but you do need to take those precautions to make sure that it doesn't happen again. If you get your gun stolen again by doing the exact same thing, then it's your fault because you had it happen once, you didn't do anything to change it, and then it happened again. At that point, while it's still not technically your fault, the gun itself getting stolen could have been prevented by you actually locking it up this time. You can't control other people's actions and what they do, but you can try to take precautions to make sure that those actions can't affect you as much. It's not wrong to try and find a cure for autism. Full disclosure, I'm a 13-year-old male who's just barely on the spectrum and I have light Asperger's. That being said, my experience isn't the worst you can have if you're autistic. I just randomly lose my train of thought while speaking and get easily distracted while studying. This is really annoying when you deal with this during exam period and in general, and to know that it's a biological issue pisses me off more. I don't find anything wrong with trying to find an injection that will cure my issue. That's fine, but I also don't think it's wrong for someone on the spectrum to choose not to take that cure. And I also think most people don't think it's wrong to find a treatment or cure. I think a lot of people think it's wrong to abort people on the basis of having autism, though. I think you'll see a lot of pushback there. Okay, so first off, I don't think that there would be any pushback against the idea of finding a cure for autism. Now, I think it would be incredibly difficult and possibly impossible because autism is in our DNA. It's genetic. If you have it, you are genetically autistic. That means unless we can find a way to change DNA, I can't really see autism being cured anytime soon. Now, we should definitely keep our options open in case any kind of like DNA testing, genetic testing proves that we can change DNA like that. That'd be fantastic. Incredibly futuristic and definitely not happening in our time, but that'd be fantastic. Also, saying I think that it should be allowed, it's like saying that I think that the cure for cancer should be allowed to be found. I mean, nobody's really pushing back against this. Like I said, I don't think anybody would push back against the cure for autism. It's something that would help you in your day-to-day life. If you got this, say, a vaccination for autism, then that would help you in your day-to-day life, just like getting your vaccination to cure your cancer. That would drastically help you. It would improve your life. I don't know where this commenter ended up getting anything about forcing people to take it. That's kind of illegal, I think, for the most part. But free will comes in with all of this. If they don't want to take it, well, it's not really affecting anybody else's lives. It's not like a virus. It's something that just affects them. Well, then yeah, they should have the right to refuse that. I don't see why anybody would think anything different about that. I feel like that would be comparable to somebody losing an arm in an accident and refusing to get a prosthetic. It's like, well, it's not going to affect anybody else, so there's really no reason to force them to do that. It's not like a vaccination for, say, polio. That's something that can be spread to other people. Same with smallpox, rubella, COVID even. Yeah, those should be mandatory for all of those who are able to get it because that will help save other lives. But if it's just going to affect you, it should be really just a personal choice. Alright, and with that, we are done. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to come back throughout the week for more content. Please like and subscribe to help keep this channel going, and remember to have a great week.